shorts, what we've been doing is focusing on memories of how different the world is for each one of us here, for everyone in the class. Everyone in the class has shared all the things that did not exist when they were a child, from a phone to a TV to a color TV to a cell phone to a smartphone to a microwave to a fax machine to a computer. Like, you name it, forget about push button phones. I mean, a phone obviously was a rotary phone, and having party lines on the phone, and paper plates, dryers. The world has changed and changed and changed. And it's interesting because we're all different ages, but for all of us, the world is so, so different than when we were children. I know if I would speak to my children, as I sometimes do, of all the things that did not exist when I was a child. I don't mean just a child at 5 years old, when I was growing up. Like I said, I remember the first time fax machines. When I heard about it, it sounded like preposterous. Fantasy, sci-fi. You put a piece of paper in here and it's going to come out there? Like, come on. Faxes, internet, email, social media, cell phones, microwaves, GPS. Remember, if you were taking a trip, maybe you would go to AAA and they would give you like a map,
Yes.
you know, how you're going to get there. I mean, Google, personal computers, the world has changed and changed and changed. And I'm talking about like in the last 30 years, how much the world has changed. That story I was saying with my father, having this huge box in his car that was a phone in the car, which was like unbelievable, was in the 1990s. It wasn't 100 years ago. It wasn't even 50 years ago. In the 1990s. Talking about some 30 years ago, to envision then that every single one of us and all of our children walk around with something with enormous capabilities in our pocket that doesn't cost that much. It's very interesting because the world is on fast forward. Your grandparents, great grandparents, great great grandparents, people born in the 1820s would pretty much have recognized the world some of your parents were born into, from the 1820s to the 1920s. They would have basically recognized that world. We could speak to our children and they think our childhood is a different world. So what happened? Technology, science, medical developments, everything is on fast forward. Meaning the world didn't change that much or that fast for hundreds of years. And then it started picking up the pace a bit faster, and now it's zooming. It's like you can't write a medical book. It will be obsolete by the time it's printed. So there's an ancient Hebrew text that provides insight into what we've all experienced. So in this foundational work of Kabbalistic thought, which is called the Zohar, written originally by Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yochai, in the 2nd century. So very unusual for such a work, which is a very deep, mystical work. It's Kabbalah. It's the most foundational work of Kabbalah. There's a prophecy recorded, which is not generally the function of this work. But in discussing Noah and the Great Flood, which occurred when Noah was 600 years old, the windows of above and the windows of below opened up and flooded the world, meaning the windows of above, that's all the rain, and the windows, the fountains from below, all the under earth water, everything opened up and washed the world. So in the Zohar, in the most foundational book of Kabbalah, written, credited to Reb Shimon Bar, the son of Yochai, the Zohar states that in the year 600 of the 6th millennium, meaning in the Jewish, in the year 5600, once again, the fountains of above and below will open up, not flooding the world with water, but flooding the world with knowledge. What are these fountains of above and below? The fountains of below are sciences, and the fountains of above is knowledge of God. Those are the fountains that have been flooding the world since the year 5600, meaning The world was progressing on a very slow course for hundreds and hundreds of years. Change and advancement was creeping, creeping. In the 1200s, which means at the beginning of the 6th millennium in the Jewish calendar, Roger Bacon fashioned the scientific method, and then roughly in the year 5600, which is parallel to 1840, things started opening up. Remember, in the Zohar, in this prophecy, they're saying in the 600th year, parallel to Noah being 600 years old when the flood started, in the 6th millennium, which is the millennium from 5000 to 6000, in the 600th year, which is the year 5600, which in the Gregorian calendar will be in the year 1840, things suddenly started open up, because remember, the prophecy of the Zohar is that at that time, the fountains from below and the fountains from above will again open up. So by the flood, way back, the fountains from above and below opened up and poured water on the world in the 600th year of the life of Noah. And the Zohar says, in the 6th millennium, in the 600th year, like Noah's life was 600 by the flood, so in the year 5600, again these fountains will open up. But this time they're not flooding the world with water like they did by the Great Flood. They're flooding the world with knowledge. Knowledge from above, the fountains from above, not raining, but pouring knowledge from above, knowledge of God. The fountains from below, not water flooding the earth, but knowledge, but from below, knowledge of the world, what we would call sciences, the natural sciences. So in 1840, things started opening up. It's very interesting because Newsweek magazine attributes the modern era, the date they put for it is the 1820s, which is pretty close. So 1840, we have the end of the Industrial Revolution, and the pace begins to quicken and gets quicker and gets quicker. The 1900s are sort of like a demarcation line, right? Once we pass the 1900, we have the Wright brothers, we have cars being mass produced. Dixie said her parents had a car. The world is changing. This is all the waters of below. And in the waters of above, Torah. The world is now flooded with Torah like never before. Today, this flooding of the world with the water of Torah. Today, there's a very large, what's called a yeshiva, which means a school for young men, for rabbinical students. It's a very large such school in Lakewood, New Jersey. Very large for America. In that school, approximately 8,000 students study Torah. Now, you want to hear an interesting fact? Before the Holocaust, there weren't 8,000 students studying Torah in all of Europe. There's more students studying in one school. Yes, it's a very, very, very large school. But in that one school, there are more students studying Torah than studied in all of Europe before the Holocaust. And there are many schools in the world today. Today we have a plethora of Jewish books. I personally have no doubt that I own more Jewish holy books than was available in the typical, what they would call the shtetl, the small area where the Jews would live in the towns in Europe. Personally, in my house, I have no question I have more books. And that's just me, you know. My husband was very impressed. He's learning with Danielle's husband, and he mentioned a rather obscure work he wanted to learn with him. And James said, oh yeah, I have it. So, you know, we are flooded. It is so
surprised, but I wasn't.
Before, to learn, you need to know Hebrew. You need to know Aramaic. Now Torah is translated in every language. Torah is out there in Arabic. Anytime you want, on any topic you want, Google, search. There's going to be a YouTube video, meaning rabbis all over the world can be teaching you Torah from the comfort of your living room. Like, look at what Linda shared with us, right? So she's in Michigan, and she stumbles across, aka God sends to her path, a rabbi of Jerusalem. This wouldn't have been possible. I'm not, and again, we're not saying 100 years ago this wouldn't have been possible. When did YouTube start, right? See, 30 years ago this wouldn't have happened. Linda's a sincere searcher, but how's she supposed to connect with this rabbi in Jerusalem? But God, I mean, I'm not saying God couldn't have done it, but here we made it really easy for him. Really, really, really easy. So we have here, again, in the beginning with Noah, the world was flooded from above and below with water. The Zohar said in the 600th year, like the years of Noah by the flood in the 6th millennium, the year 5600 parallel to the year 1840, the world's going to be flooded from knowledge. Knowledge from above, knowledge of God, Torah knowledge. Knowledge from below, the sciences, the natural knowledge, the natural sciences of the world. So what's the point? Why is God flooding the world with knowledge? So if you look back in the Zohar to get the entire quote, the Zohar states, and in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, the windows of wisdom above and the fountains of wisdom below will open up, and the world will be rectified in order to progress to the 7th millennium. So what's the Zohar saying? Why is the world flooded with knowledge? For what to happen? What did the Zohar say? Did any of you catch it? In order to progress to the 7th millennium. Do you know what's supposed to happen in the 7th millennium? Do you know what the 7th millennium is? Let me give a little bit of background here, because maybe there's a lot of knowledge I'm maybe presupposing people have that they do or they don't. God created the world in how many days?
7.
7. Yay. You got it. Now, 7 days are because each day created a millennium.
Oh.
So there's 7 days because this world has a mandate of 7,000 years. Every day created another 1,000 years of history. Well, history and of course in the future as well. Because we are right now in the year 5,785 since creation. Which means we have some 200 plus years to get to the final millennium, and then another 1,000 years. So that's the world. And again, this is, I could explain to you more deeply that every year really expresses one of God's emotional attributes, and that emotional attribute created the day and created the millennium. We see the same nature in the day in the 1,000 years. So every day is creating 1,000 years. The final day of creation, day 7, what did God create on day 7?
Shabbat.
Shabbat. He created peace. He brought in Shabbat, which created the millennium of Mashiach, the millennium of redemption, because Mashiach is considered one long Shabbos. Or every Shabbos, every Shabbat is considered a miniature taste of redemption. So every Shabbat is redemption in microcosm, and redemption is Shabbat in macrocosm. So the Shabbat of the 7 days of creation created a millennium of Shabbat, and that's the millennium of the Mashiach. Now that is already the Mashiach in the second stage, because we're told Mashiach will be 2 stages. Actually, we have to already enter the second stage before the year 6,000. So sometime before the year 6,000, we have to enter the first stage, be in the first stage, and progress to the second stage, where we have to be holding by the year 6,000, because the world changes. It's going to be a different world, and we have to be ready for that new energy. We've got to be standing there. We've got to be ready. We've got to, in essence, make it happen. That's what's on us. So the world is flooded in this knowledge from above and knowledge from below, the Zohar says, to transition into the 7th millennium. Listen to it again. The windows of above and the fountains of wisdom below will open up and the world will be rectified. So all this knowledge is somehow bringing rectification to the world in order to progress to the seventh millennium. So all of this, the knowledge from above and the knowledge from below, is to get us to redemption. The developments of Torah, the flooding of the world with the inner secrets of Torah, which began with the Baal Shem Tov, roughly in the year 6,500. All the developments in the scientific world, they're all to enable us to transfer to millennium number 7, the final millennium, the millennium of redemption. So this is very fascinating. And again, a little bit before explaining the 7th millennium, let's just explain enough about Mashiach to understand this. But let's stop before we even do that. Let me ask you a question. We have waters from above, knowledge of God, Torah, God's inner secrets, Hasidus, flooding the world. We have waters from below, science, with all the technology, all the practical ways our lives have turned on their head since 1840, quicker and quicker and faster and speeding, racing ahead the pace. And why is all this happening? The Zohar says it's happening for us to transfer to the 7th millennium, for us to live in the era of redemption, for us to bring redemption and live with redemption. So when I say the world is flooding with knowledge of above, the windows of Shemaim opened up and the world is flooded with knowledge of God and knowledge of God and knowledge of God, and wherever you stumble there's more knowledge of God, that makes sense. You want to bring redemption, the more we understand God, the more God is visible to us and to himself. This is how redemption should happen. That makes perfect sense. Why do you think we need the waters from below? Any thoughts on that? To say I need more knowledge of God to bring redemption, I get that. More awareness of him, I get that too. More Torah study, I get that too. All that makes perfect sense in my brain. But why do you think I need the waters from below? The sciences of the world. Why do you think they're part of the journey to redemption? Any thoughts on that?
Could it be that because there's Zoom and we can look up things and be connected a lot easier than the days where we didn't have computers and that? That's where the science is coming in, and maybe things that are not invented yet that is to come.
That makes a lot of sense. Anyone else? Any other ideas? Anyone else? Any other ideas? Linda had a very, very wise idea. Anyone else? Sometimes someone gives a good answer, nobody else wants to give an answer after that.
No.
Anyone else? Any other ideas?
I think that it started, like you said, way back with the Industrial Revolution and everything. But I think it had to progress to the point where people would accept what's coming. And without computers and everything, people can't understand. I'm not making sense. It says that everybody in the world will see Messiah.
Yes.
Well, without computers, you can't. That's the way everybody sees Messiah. And that's the way information is spread so fast. And so that's what I think.
That's an interesting thought, that we need this revolution of sciences to give us the tools on a practical basis to, in a natural way, fulfill the prophecies about redemption, many of which seem totally beyond nature. And Dixie is saying at least some of them, and more and more and more, could be natural. Because the world today is very different than the world was.
You said it better than I did. That's what I was trying to say.
I mean, just thinking, imagining, I don't know what's fair, the World Fair, when they showed this idea of like a phone that you could see, a picture phone, right? You could talk and see the person and like, whoa. Or, Dick Tracy, he had the watch. He had a watch and it was a phone. Yeah, Dick Tracy. Am I dating anyone here?
Yeah.
So, Guess what? They're phone watchers nowadays. Guess what? All of us can talk on the phone and see the person on the other end if we so desired, right?
Yeah.
No big deal. No big deal. So, yes, Dixie has a point that things that could have seemed like impossible. I mean, of course, God can and will break nature by redemption, but some things don't have to be nature breaking now because our world can do a lot of things it couldn't do. It's a very smart point. Anyone else? Any other ideas?
How about advances in medical science to promote cures for certain diseases so that people can be healthy and have an opportunity to participate in redemption?
That's so beautiful because, again, what you're saying is in the time of redemption, we're told everyone will be healthy. But what Sabra's saying is, again, sort of almost like Dixie's point from a different angle, it doesn't have to be like the natural world and God's world are like two parallel tracks. So, of course, ultimately, when we come to the complete redemption, everyone will be healthy as God cured everyone for the giving of the Torah, and there was nobody that was deaf, and there was nobody that was dumb, and there was nobody that was blind. Everyone will have the complete health by redemption. But imagine that was actually from the natural world as well. Like I remember hearing, I don't know how many years ago, scientists somewhere, they discovered the gene that's responsible for aging. They don't know yet how to tinker with it to put it on pause. But that idea of discovering the gene was like a huge possibility for someday doing that. So it was like so cool to think, wow, we know by the redemption people are going to live forever. Well, imagine if that could happen naturally. If from a natural, medical, scientific, biological perspective, these things can happen. And you could say, well, what's the point? God's going to do it anyway. True. But when the natural world, like from itself, is echoing, it shows how in sync it is with God, how in sync the physical world is with God's vision, that the prophecies of redemption sort of could, on some level, unfold from nature itself. That's beautiful. Any other thoughts? Any other ideas? Why God is putting in the system that as the waters from above, knowledge of God, flood the world, so too the waters from below. The sciences. We are all beneficiaries of the waters of above and of the waters of below. Definitely, there weren't a lot of Noahides in the early 1800s, So definitely everyone here is a beneficiary of the waters from above flooding the world, which maybe even made you sensitive, made you feel, hear, sense, search. Are you all so much wiser than your ancestors? Or, like we're saying, they didn't have the technology that made Tuvia Singer accessible? Maybe they didn't have the space, and there's a lot of focus on survival. Maybe they didn't have the space to think and introspect and wonder and search. Or maybe it's a different world now. And there's so much knowledge from above that's flooded this world that sensitive people hear it. Like a tune being played very softly. But if you're sensitive, if you're listening, you can pick it up. So there's some message being given. The world is flooded with knowledge of God. And you're hearing it. You're the world and you're hearing it. And you're hearing something that's making you search, that's making you look, that's making you feel, is this true? I know this is what all my ancestors believed. I'm not smarter than my ancestors. But I'm wondering, is it true? So definitely the world being flooded with this knowledge of God is definitely manifest in, I believe, all the attendees in this class, because it didn't exist then, that's for sure. So it's very interesting. Lubavitcher Rebbe speaks about this concept, and he gives 3 understandings of why are the waters from below, why are radios and video technology part of the process of redemption? Are they going to help us transfer in from the 6th millennium, from life as we know it, to the 7th millennium, to redemption. So the Rebbe answers on 3 levels. And some of the things you said, you will hear in the Rebbe's answer as well, because people gave really good answers. So on one level, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that technology is a great tool, that being flooded with this knowledge from below is actually helping us understand God.
Does it get over? It's over 7, about 8:30.
Technology is a great tool. Many spiritual concepts are hard for us to fathom, but it used to be harder. Like now with phones, we can see and hear people at the other end of the world. So when we learn in Torah, when we are taught, and we believe this, there's an eye that sees all, an ear that hears all. In all previous time, people took that on faith. But with all the video technology available today, with all the spyware available today, the concept that all that we do is seen and recorded above, it makes a lot of sense. It's very easy for us to grasp that. It's very natural. So as we have technology and science, certain things, which I think a number of you said something very similar. Yeah, that doesn't seem, I mean, of course, God's doing it. It's obviously miraculous, but it doesn't seem so miraculous. It doesn't seem so out of bounds, because something similar to this exists in the natural world. On another level, even more deeply, we can use technology available to make the world begin to fulfill the messianic vision of the prophets, which also a number of you were saying. For example, it states that the world will be full of knowledge of God. All flesh will perceive God by redemption. Well, now, someone's giving a Torah class on the radio, right? Imagine the radio, pre-YouTube. Someone's giving a Torah class on the radio. Those radio waves literally penetrate the entire world. The world is literally full of knowledge of God. And people all over the world can perceive it. As long as you got that band of the radio on, on your antenna, you hooked into that station, you could hear from anywhere in the world. Imagine people all over the world can hear the words discussing God as they're spoken on the radio. Obviously, as Linda was sharing with us, her story with Tovia Singer and YouTube. This is happening again, this is happening again. This is normal, right? The world is flooded with knowledge of God. Awareness of God is being broadcast from one corner to anywhere in the world. It's so accessible. The world is full of God. So that's a messianic concept, that the world will be full of God, that the world will be full of an awareness and knowledge of God. Now, through technology, that concept is actually happening. We do not yet see the complete revelation of redemption. We see a lot of things that imply exile. And yet, this messianic concept, the world will be full of knowledge of God, famous words of Isaiah, it's already happened through technology, through a radio. Radio doesn't seem to have very high-level technology, but through radio, it's happened. The world is full of knowledge of God. And even more than that, the inner core of the inner dimension of Torah, what has been flooding the world since the windows of heaven opened up, is the awareness of the oneness of God. In a world that seems full of so much stuff, so many things, so many different materials, it's all one. It's all only God, which is, of course, completely contradictory. We think there's a lot of things going on. Torah says, no, it's all God. Oh, yeah, God plus, God plus. No, not God plus and not God minus, just God. Well, I could say it. I could and have taught this concept many times, but I don't know if I think it yet. I know it, but I don't know if I think that way. But now, science is telling us very similar things. We're not looking here, as we did in the first 2 ways of thinking the Rebbe gave, of the technology, of what science had produced. Looking at science itself, we see how science is mirroring this knowledge of God that's flooding the world. So if we would just look at science, like, what do I mean? Well, in 1864, there was a first periodic table of elements. There were 28. In 1900, we discovered a lot more. There were 82. In 1960, there were 100. Today, there are 118. I remember when I was a child in school, I'm sure you all had in the science room or the science lab or in your class, the periodic table and all those colors, all those elements, implying more and more building blocks of this physical world. But at the same time, physics is uncovering that all of these 118 elements come from a few basic, what they call strings. Now they believe there are 10 strings from which all these 118 elements come, from which everything else comes. So everything's built on the 118 elements. And these 118 elements come from 10 strings. So the whole world, in essence, come from these 10 strings. That's very parallel to the Kabbalistic model of God and creation. God, and then through his 10 divine powers, creation emerges. So science itself is expressing that this world, which seems to be built from so many different things, it's from a few basic building blocks. So the inner dimension of Hasidic thought, that this world of multiplicity, this which seems to be a world of multiplicity, is actually a world of one, a world of God. So we're taking something that's completely counterintuitive and it's becoming graspable. It's even becoming logical. I mean, science says, right? When science says, it becomes logical to the human mind. So if we're saying all these things according to science, 118, actually 10, actually they all come from one, okay, let's call that one God. Not such a big stretch. So when God is flooding the world from below with science and technology, segueing us to enter the 7th millennium, just as the windows of heaven are raining down on us the secrets of Torah, and all of this is helping us transfer to the era of redemption. Now, there's a lot more I want to say on this, explain much more as we touched on this idea of the 7th millennium and all of these things. I think we will stop at this point. It's a good stopping point. It's the right time. So we're very much in the middle of the concept, but I think what we've gained already at this point is definitely experientially, we all see how the world is racing ahead, and we've experienced this personally, each one of us in our own lives. Racing, things become outdated before you get them delivered to Amazon Prime. You know? That's the race. And now we're saying there's a godly overlay to that. Nothing's random. There's a reason. Waters from above have to parallel the waters from below. They're both flooding our world, and there's a reason for them flooding our world, to bring us to the redemption right now. We should have the redemption. And then, like some of you said, it could seem so natural. Because, oh yeah, well, this was progressing and it just progressed a bit more, you know. God managed to fast forward the process. And hey, we call this redemption. To be continued next week.